Reading, writing and arithmetic. Those are the core lessons many of us remember from our school days. And while discipline in class wasn't always fun, for the vast majority it was never an option. But now a surprising number of parents are opting out of that educational norm altogether. Instead, they've decided to cater directly to their child's interests, whatever they may be.
To school or not to school? Now, that is the question that we're asking today. Now, Dayna and her husband, Joe, are what are called unschoolers. In fact, they describe themselves as radical unschoolers, and they say it is cruel and disrespectful to put a child in school. Every kid in America is up cheering right now.
Hello, everyone, to another edition of Dissolving the Divide. I'm Leslie Powers, here with my co-host, Derek Bartolicelli. Hey, Derek.
Bonjour, bonjour.
And
How's it going?
yeah, today we have a very special guest, Dayna Martin, and she is an advocate and speaker and educator and author. Her focus has been in radical unschooling, beginning with a concept of attachment parenting and expanding that throughout a child's lifespan through true radical unschooling to help create independent and, independent, self-responsible individuals. And I'll ask you, Dayna, to share more on this. But before we do that, Derek, do you want to start us off with anything? You all good over there in France?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll share later on, but yeah, I'm just really excited to have Dayna on. I'm recently with a woman of mother of 3 children. And she actually was a midwife, and she gave birth to at least 2,000 babies into this world. A little bit different than how it's done in Western American medicine, but yeah, pretty holistic, really cool. But yeah, just really honored, and it's gonna be a really cool chat with you, Dayna. Looking at, you've been around for a while. You're old school, and so it's just going to be really interesting to ask you some questions, just seeing the landscape of, what's been transpiring over your journey of being interviewed and being on television and having so many interactions and having your own practice and services and creating a wonderful homestead, if you will, raising wonderful, conscious children. So yeah. How's it going?
Yeah, welcome, Dayna.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, let's start with just you sharing a little bit about your background and your focus, the focus of your work. Yeah.
So I'll start with my first and foremost, that started everything, the fact that I'm a mother of 4 kids. They're 16, 19, 22, and 24. And I actually can't believe that 3 of them are adults. It went by so quickly, as it always does. And in this whole journey, I never anticipated being a voice for this life. It wasn't something I sought out to be. It just happened really organically and naturally for me as a mother. And it started with the birth of my first child, Devin. And I had a natural birth in a hospital with a midwife. And it was life-changing for me that I had given birth under my own power. I didn't know anyone in my family, and I had no friends that had a natural birth, and it was transformative. And I said that I wanted to help other women achieve it because it helped me become a fiercely protective mother and really tune into my instincts when I was able to birth under my own power. I later went on to have 3 more children, all of them at home. And I became a childbirth educator and doula. When my son, my first, was about a year old, I started studying to be, and I later became a midwife. And I gave a lot of parenting classes about attachment parenting. And I came at it from the angle of I didn't have any support. I didn't know anybody else that was doing this. And I wanted to provide that for people. And so I started having classes and meetings, and it just kept expanding. And before I knew it, I was sharing about radical unschooling, because to me, radical unschooling is an extension of attachment parenting. And I can share more about that, but I'll stop, see if you have any questions about anything in particular.
Yes. So it sounds like that your experience runs this whole continuum, starting out with natural birthing and home birthing into this attachment parenting, which naturally flows into this radical unschooling.
Yes.
So can we start with maybe a definition of attachment parenting?
Sure. A definition of attachment parenting is an intuitive form of parenting where you're focused on the needs of your baby and child as much as your own. Traditional parenting is focused on the authoritarian parenting paradigm, which is focused on the parent's needs solely, the parent's needs for quiet, uninterrupted sleep, obedience and compliance, and behavior modification. It's a big focus on behavior modification. And rarely does it take into account the child's needs. In fact, when you talk about that, people think it's kind of crazy because the focus on traditional parenting is to train a child and focus on their behavior and correcting behavior and punishing behavior. So what I've always done from the beginning is to trust my children. I was told by everybody around me after I had my first baby that my son would manipulate me and I shouldn't hold him too much. And I needed to put him on a feeding schedule and I couldn't sleep with him near me, that he would get used to me meeting his needs and responding and he'd manipulate me. And it just felt so wrong. And I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I trusted my baby. I held him when he wanted to be held and nursed him as much as he wanted, which is a lot for newborns. I co-slept safely with all my kids. My crib was never used. That was given to me at my first baby shower. It became like a cat bed and a laundry collector. And yeah, I've always trusted them and I always have, nursed them until they weaned on their own. And I didn't even know it was considered really radical to do that at the time. I started to realize it when I got a lot of criticism and I sought support and I found some information online. But I couldn't believe that people thought it was damaging a child to love them and meet their needs. Yeah. Well, radical unschooling is an extension of that. And the trust that you have for you and your child in the beginning, you extend to every area of their life as they grow older, including education. And so I trusted when they wanted to, when they learned to read, I facilitated their learning based on their interests. My kids have never done a workbook page or have had a test or have followed a curriculum. You never have to do any of that. So my kids have never had any form of forced learning in their lives. They've always learned organically and naturally based on what they loved. And we've had a lot of life experiences. We've traveled a lot with my career, which is great. But we've also had mentorships and you have to be willing to say yes to facilitating a lot of things that might scare you at first. And you have to get over those fears and be present with your children. My children have never been punished either. And which, when people first hear that, they think that it's absolutely crazy. And all they imagine is chaos and unruly kids and mean kids and that they wouldn't do what they were told. And that's not true at all. In fact, when you don't control and punish your children, and you're kind to them and you're receptive to them and patient, they're very receptive back, like you would be in any healthy relationship. And so despite never having being forced to learn anything, nor having any forced bedtimes or anything in their lives like that, they've grown to be very, very happy, successful people. Now, when I first started out in this career, a lot of it was kind of based in, my belief in this, because I had, researched and read about other families doing this as radical as it was. And everybody told me that I was doing an experiment, but I knew I wasn't. Something inside me told me I wasn't. But now, having them grown to adulthood, now I can come from the place of yes, I was right. You do not have to go the mainstream route in raising children and go against your instincts. So for me, this is really a parenting philosophy more than an educational one. But the education happens as a side effect of living a rich, full, exciting life together. And so that's what we've done from the beginning.
Yeah, I love it, Dayna. And I just have to say, as a mother of three with similar ages, I have 24, 23, and 15, that I had a similar intuition and philosophy from their births. Although I wasn't in the position or I didn't fully connect all the dots about unschooling, but I was very much on board with the, the trusting the infant themselves, her and himself, in terms of my following their lead and meeting their needs very, very fluidly. I didn't have crying babies. I wasn't an exhausted parent. I co-slept and I nursed on demand, and I had a sling and I carried my babies up, and as long as they would fit in and, seemed to want to do that. And where I found that where things became difficult was because I did put my kids into mainstream school, and then there's a lot of pushback and a lot of differences in philosophies that make it very stressful. And my experience was often that I felt like I was criticized for my approach, or again, had similar types of concerns, like, my kids were going to be out of control, they were going to be delinquents, or, and I'm happy to say that I have I have 3 amazing kids, and my 2, which are technically adults, are independent and thriving and, and intelligent kids. So I only can imagine what it would have been like had I been able to be a stay-at-home, or to include my kids in an unschooling process. So I'd love to hear you more about how did you pull this off in today's world?
Sometimes I look back and I don't know. Well, because I had 4 kids under the age of 9 in the beginning. And I published my first book, Radical Unschooling, A Revolution Has Begun, when my son Orion was only 6 weeks old. And I look back, I'm like, how did I do all of that? I just feel like I learned to be present and just take one day at a time and really focus on each moment in that way, instead of fearing the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that took a lot, especially in our culture, because living in the moment comes very naturally to kids. And it's only kind of trained out of them when they're in school, and all the preparation is for adulthood. What are you going to be when you grow up? And, the whole focus on your future, your future, your future. Kids are really conditioned out of that in the moment, living in the now mentality. That's very natural to them. And then they spend their whole adult lives, including myself, trying to get back to that mindset. You're taking yoga, you're doing all these things to get back to the now, when so I think because my children were so in the moment, that I learned to be a lot easier. And so it's funny, because when I say I don't know how I did it, I mean that time went so quick. And I think what was hard was dealing with the people that were against it, and not having support, and being criticized. Because I was out in the media before my 4th child even came along, like starting with the Dr. Phil show, kind of thrust in that limelight of being like the poster family for radical unschooling. And it continued for 10 years, from Nightline to Fox News to, we had reality show companies making sizzle reels. We were really out there promoting it. I was, and my kids, when they wanted to, when it was their choice, a lot of them are part of it, the older 2 especially. And we got picked up for a YouTube channel, and we were sponsored by Maker. So we had, at the same time, my radical unschooling life with my kids was not only living the life authentically, but also promoting it and being out sharing it. So the way in which it was done was because we were living in partnership. Because when you're in the authoritarian paradigm and you're controlling children all day, every day, it's not a joyful life. It's pretty miserable to force a child, or coerce a child, or bribe to do what you think they should be doing all day, every day, from bedtimes to schoolwork to, it's exhausting. And most parents can't even imagine adding like homeschooling or unschooling on top of that already. But if you step back from that and you see that everything in our life was consensual, the kids were never forced to do anything they didn't want to do. Except the only time, and it wasn't major force, but it was totally essential, was when my daughter got bit by a skunk. Rabies. So the kids all had rabies shots because they all held this baby skunk, but they chose to do it. Even then, it wasn't forced. We explained to them the seriousness of it. But there's never been a situation where, they weren't living in a consensual dynamic with me. So when you're living like that, it's joyful. Now, the siblings fought like any other kids. They fight half the time, they love each other half the time. So like navigating typical sibling stuff was, something I had to really learn to do and navigate well. But they loved learning, and they loved opportunities and growth. And yeah, so it was done joyfully, to be honest.
So there was a natural drive that you witnessed in your children to learn and grow. And how did you facilitate that in the unschooling environment?
Well, it depends on the child and how they like to learn. So with my son Devin, the oldest, he was really hands-on. And when he showed an interest in blacksmithing, for example, I found a local blacksmith that came over and he mentored him. And you have to be willing to facilitate your child's learning based on whatever they're interested in, and bring as many resources into their life as possible to learn and grow from. So we subscribed to blacksmithing magazines, which I didn't even know there was, but there is. Went to the library, got our blacksmithing books. We watched videos on it. We turned our shed out in the back that was for storage into a forge. We learned how to make a homemade forge. We spent weeks and weeks, years, to facilitate this passion. And it turned into such a wonderful hobby for him that he ended up opening an Etsy store and selling knives and swords on Etsy. So it's a lot of work. It's not for the lazy parent. And we don't live life broken down into subjects, because that's not natural and nothing we do as adults. So we never said this is math, English, science, ever. We just live life. However, just for the sake of understanding, if you were to break our life down into subjects, you would see in the way we facilitated Devin's like passion for blacksmithing, it does touch on all the subjects. I mean, you need math, you need the history, you need all the components to pull it into a full understanding, but that happens just naturally when you're internally motivated to learn something. You learn it easily and joyfully.
Mm-hmm.
Forced learning is what's difficult, not, desire. It's very, very different. So everybody thinks that that must be so hard to get your kids to learn all these things. It's like everybody has it so confused. It's forced learning. When somebody isn't interested in the content, that's hard.
Yeah. It's like we all have an inherent, pushback to being coerced, and forced to do things.
Especially kids born in this generation.
We're not even forced. It's almost like generationally, the parents, follow what was handed down to them and just go funnel into the school system, because that's basically all they knew, really. And like the long forgotten teachings were that they were forgotten. So it is such a radical thing to think about outside of the box of, okay, actually, take responsibility and, be the way showers and facilitate and provide any kind of resources necessary for these kids, and not have the home stocked full of junk food. They can have whatever they want to eat at whatever time, but I'm sure, and you mentioned not having necessarily rules but principles, and I'm sure you are quite aligned to natural law and the Hermetica to a good degree, and I'm curious if you even have the Kabbalion available for your kids to read, that kind of stuff, but or even Give to Nature by Dayna Martin. But what's been, because I'm really curious as to like some of the arguments you've had, or just like indifferences with people being kind of in that limelight, being on television and having like probably some pretty intense discussions, because it strikes a lot of nerves and heartstrings, parent to parent, talking about certain values and practices, and how they have whatever pride and that kind of stuff with their children and their upbringing and yada yada. So yeah, I'm gonna trail off and lose the question originally, but as far as distinguishing and like laying down like the principles, how are you able to really like teach your children that, and or even just like lead by example? And it's like that art of life in a sense also, right? So
Yeah, well, our kids are living with me side by side every day. So they're in the real world. So they see that there are laws in our state and different things, you stand in line at the grocery store. I mean, the school is an artificial environment trying to imitate real life. It's not necessary when you're in real life. And so we talk about all of these things. They know if I speed, I've gotten a traffic ticket for speeding. Not recently. Miami's a lot different. Everybody speeds here, except for me now. I don't speed anymore. But, no, but I mean, so rules need to be enforced with punishment. And so when you have rules, they need to be enforced. And so rules are also a replacement for being present. And so when you're present and you talk about things, it sounds so simple and basic. And I was asked this question a lot, but like, well, what do you do when your kids do something they're not supposed to do? So we talk about it. Kids don't need to be yelled at and punished and had things taken away and grounded for them to learn. In fact, they learn the opposite, intention for the punishment when you do that. And so, yeah, I mean, if something comes up, we talk about things. We've always had discussions where I'm connected, I'm there. I was always with them, and explaining things to them.
Yeah.
So the principle, I have to have a standard for myself because children learn from modeling. They don't only learn from modeling. It depends on who they are. Some kids are more highly sensitive than others, but a big portion of it is how I choose to navigate the world and show up. So I think it takes a lot of self-responsibility to, be a good person in this world. And so that's something that I always, strove to do. I've grown to be better, like we all do as we get older. And so that's basically what I mean by live by principles, so there's things that are inherently, wrong in a lot of people's eyes. But if there's something that I might not agree with and my kids did, we would talk about it. A lot of times they'd have really good points. I was always willing to be flexible and understand, I'm really concerned about this situation. Like, what do you guys think? We would present like issues that would come up and I would ask their opinions and really value them. But I was, they always turned to me as like a valued, a mother, a leader, that not a authoritarian person who's allowing them to do things or not.
Yeah.
Like they didn't ask me like, can I go do this? In the way of like getting permission. It was more like, Mom, I really want to go climb that tree. I'm like, it's really tall, sweetie. Like, are you sure? Like, what? Dad's like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, I'm a little nervous that you're gonna fall. Like, well, no, what if I put a belt around my waist while I do it? I'm like, all right, that would make me feel a lot better. I want you to do it. I want you to explore, but I'm having a little nerves here about it. It's really tall. So we'd have discussions. It was never like, no way, that's dangerous. No way. So I would present like my feelings and fears like any other parent has. And we would like have a discussion about it. Of course, when you have a toddler, it's different. You want to speak at the level they can understand. I would say I would always, in the beginning, it was kind of hard because when you're shifting to a different paradigm in your mind, you're always kind of asking yourself, can I say yes to this? And like, what are the repercussions? Like, because the automatic no is just so conditioned in us when you have little ones.
It's true. And teens.
Yes, like all the way through. But, in the beginning, it was always, I would say like, I need a minute to think about that. I learned to say that, to the kids, like, I need a minute to think about that. And just simple questions like, Mom, can we go to town to go to Starbucks? And I would have to really think about, do I have time? Because I'm somebody who's always willing to like say yes and facilitate and drop everything I'm doing. It's just my personality. But when I was doing that early on with 4 kids, I was depleted. I'm like, this isn't working. Like, I can't just, and it was really hard to kind of meet my own needs. So part of this journey for me was learning that my needs really matter, but what are my needs? When no one's ever cared about your needs. Yeah. You kind of grow up not realizing that you're responsible for them. So part of this journey was not only facilitating my kids' needs, but really tuning into like what mine were, because that was the hardest part of it. Because if I didn't take care of my needs, I couldn't like come from a place of balance and respect and patience and say, you know what, sweetie, I don't really want to go to Starbucks right now. I have a few things to do, but we can go later. What time? How about like 3? I want to get these things done first. Because a lot of people that come to this life, they go from in their minds, it's either like the authoritarian approach is very parent-led. And so they think that radical unschooling is like totally the opposite, and they shift to being totally child-led, but it's still black and white thinking. It's not, together, us and them. It's not, and when it's really child-led and the parents not having their needs met, they're almost asking their children permission for things. Like they flip the authoritarian paradigm, and that's not what this is. Right. That's a big mistake. Like, sweetie, can I go take a shower? And the 3-year-olds go, oh, I've seen this happen. And it's like, it's because people just don't quite get it. We're such a black and white thinking culture that they're like, all they know is authority. And so I'm going to give my child all the authority. No, we don't need authority. We need like partnership and to talk together. So that took me a little while to integrate. Like, I was never asking my child permission to take a shower, but I'm sharing an extreme example. I would just facilitate what they wanted all the time. And I was like, this needs to be better. And what's suffering is me. So when I learned to say, I need to eat something first and then we'll go to the park.
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to go do this. And why don't you come with me and then we'll go do this. So putting my needs on the table of everybody else's was the hardest thing for me. But once I did it, I had a full cup and I was ready to facilitate more.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I relate to that. I think that was with my youngest daughter, who's very persistent and knows what she wants, and she's very big about it and can put pressure on me. And I can easily be adaptable and please.
Mhm.
And I realized that instead of my getting into this clash of, with her, it was shifting the language to really looking at what is the resistance that's coming up in me and what does that say about my own needs, rather than just sort of like, no, I can't do that now or whatever. It was like, okay, what is happening for me? And is her request, really a problem, or is it just that I'm not ready to change what I'm doing and let me, look at my own limits and boundaries and how do I take care of myself and figure out a way of working with her and her wants and needs. So it's a different approach. Yeah, I love it. So what I'm hearing is that there's a real respect for children, right from the start, and a recognition that children do have inherent intelligence, and that there is a wisdom in nature that if we allow, children to sort of unfold in this interaction, this relational dynamic, that there's a trust. You talked about in the beginning about trust. And I think that's where a lot of individuals sort of indoctrinated into modern parenting, they lack the trust and will feel like if you're not controlling or setting up this reward consequence structure, that your kids are just going to run amok and that it's going to be crazy. So I'd like to hear more about the trust and what you've noticed naturally unfolds in this model.
Yeah. I first want to share that the distrust that the parent has for their ability to parent their child like this starts at birth. And I think people are much more open to hearing about women birthing naturally and how the medical management of birth is so corrupt and it undermines a woman's confidence, and the interventions that are used cause more problems than they're solving, and they rob the woman of her inner knowing and leave her feeling as though her body was broken and didn't work and she had to be saved by all manner of modern technology. Well, it's from that point that I want to extend this from the hospital to schools, that parents have the same kind of messaging from teachers and even well-meaning teachers, but just from the whole system in general, that you are not capable of doing this. We are. In the same way doctors say that to laboring women. You are not capable of doing this. We are. But because we're so conditioned in our society from day one, because of birth for most women, sadly, they never gain that self-confidence. I feel like I was so lucky to have a natural birth the first time, because if I hadn't, I'm afraid of the direction everything would have gone for me. I credit everything on me having that first moment of saying, wow, I am capable of something. I didn't need to be rescued. And our children don't need to be rescued. We don't need to be rescued, meaning we can facilitate their learning. And much like the negative side effects and consequences and the cascade of interventions that happen with birth, the same thing happens with public schooling, indoctrination for kids. It's so damaging, but it's much more lasting. And so I want to extend, that trust that a lot of people might have for birth that are watching, to continue to have that trust for yourself all throughout. It really is a continuum. And so, yeah, the trust is so essential, but it needs to be built in the parent by not stepping into the system to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really tough one. And yeah, it'd be a great moment for me to share just yeah, my girlfriend, uh mother of three, the last child she had, and there she really goes through a natural birth type of protocol, homeopathy, no artificial really drugs or relaxers, that kind of stuff. And 45 years old was the last child she gave birth to at that age.
Wow.
And all three of her births were actually more blissful than painful, to put it in lack of a better term. So, and that was through the will force and know-how of herself. But yeah, she's been a midwife for like 20 years. And yes, it really does count for something. And it is so significant that people really need to look into. And this ties into shadow work as well, as far as like the mistrust with, yeah, at birth, babies feel betrayed, whether they show it or not to a good degree. And it depends on at what time their cord was clamped, if they had the placenta still intact, and if a male was circumcised or not, that kind of these types of things. So these factors play into, later on when they grow up and become parents, and there's like cycles that have not been healed or reconciled with, and so it gets passed on to the next generation to a degree. And what I wanted to ask you, Dana, as well is I've been seeing this a couple times on Facebook, and our recent guest, we did chat with Shadow Work. Caroline Riley posted something about how, yeah, babies uh, going to sleep, and there's this practice where just let the baby cry it off and that kind of stuff. Like, have you heard certain things? And obviously, you've been there to just like be there for their needs whenever it happens. So, yeah, there's like that detachment there, like that kind of mistrust, the unspoken herd, right? So, I'm
Yeah.
kind of interested on your take on that and how that kind of creates division of these negative feedback loops generationally or that kind of stuff, So,
Yeah. I can't believe that people still are being told to let their babies cry it out. It's so against everything within a mother's instinct to do that. In fact, the only thing that makes it hard is because you're not supposed to do it and it's going against your instinct, and mothers are crying outside their babies' doors, and babies are designed to be with their mothers at night. They just are. We are so connected that mothers help regulate the baby's breathing. They're supposed to lay next to their baby. Obviously, you have to throw in that they're safe and unsafe co-sleeping. Information, so you want to research that if you plan on co-sleeping, and I recommend it highly. Nursing is meant to be throughout the night, not on a schedule.
Yeah.
My baby's nursed probably every hour for the first year, if not the first 2 years, and it was normal, and I got plenty of sleep because they were next to me. So co-sleeping is not a child learning to put themselves to sleep. It's learned helplessness. They realize no one's coming, and the cortisol is so damaging that rises during that time. It causes so many issues in a child that stays with them forever.
Yeah.
So it damages the brain of the
Yeah.
baby. So a lot of babies cry it out. And it's based on the authoritarian model of convenience parenting. I really believe that I was a mother even at night. And a lot of people don't have that mindset. They think they put their baby to bed and they're told that this is good for the baby and you should never let your baby in your bed. And it's just, none of it's true. And it causes such detachment. So I've always been a proponent against, like I've been a proponent for co-sleeping. And it was so controversial. It's so funny. When I first started, it was like the most controversial thing ever. My in-laws at the time came upstairs once and they saw that I had like a queen bed next to a twin. And they were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, Devin's sleeping in with us. I wanted to make room so we were all comfortable." Because the issue that people have is that they're uncomfortable and they want to end co-sleeping. And it's just like co-sleeping is not the problem. You just don't have enough room. Make a bigger bed. And they were like, "Wow, this makes us really uncomfortable. We're not comfortable coming upstairs anymore."
Wow.
Because we were co-sleeping.
Wow.
It was so bizarre. Like I never had support. And I just, I sought support. I wanted to offer other support. But our society is really waking up from that time. Like I'm seeing so much more support for co-sleeping than I've ever seen. And in the 24 years I've been on this path, gosh, things have changed in such good directions.
Yeah, which is,
parenting.
it's so important, because
Yes.
those practices really do cause long-term trauma effects.
Oh, yes.
Children, through into adulthood. And Irene Lyon, a somatic specialist, she talks about that. She talks about the effects on the nervous system of that type of parenting approach. And I would say a lot of the authoritarian parenting has been the cause of many, mental health problems in adults today.
And it causes mental health problems in the parents too. I mean, we talk about like how much this damages children to be in the authoritarian approach, but rarely is it spoken about, and I'm speaking about it more, but how much it robs the parent of what they should have had.
Yeah. And the enjoyment of parenting and the enjoyment of your children. I think it creates this schism and this division between you and your child, the more that you see yourself as an authority or a controller. And there's a common, phrase, oh, you're not your child's friend. Don't be your child's friend. You need to be put that consequence and that discipline, and it doesn't matter that they're what their emotional response is to that. What's your feedback to that kind of advice?
Oh, so many times. It's so funny. And it's, I think about it a lot when I hear that. I'm like, what does that mean? I'm always thinking about, what do people mean by that?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that what they're, people have different meanings when they're saying, you shouldn't be your child's friend. And I'm like, are they saying that you shouldn't be kind to your child? But as far as your child's friend, obviously a parent's a very different role. But I think they mean not punishing, and so I think it's the authoritarian. They're saying that you shouldn't be in partnership. You should live the authoritarian dynamic. That's ultimately what it means. I mean, I've said before, like, I'm my child's friend, but I'm not like their friends, but I'm their friend in the sense of like, I care about them, like a friend would, but way more probably, I'm their mom. I don't know what it's like to be my child's friend only because I'm a mother. And so it's kind of a weird thing to say, and it's a blanket statement that people don't think much about when they say it, much like a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So how do you see your role, your responsibility as a mother in this? If you were to define the role of the mother, how would you do it? What would you say?
No one's ever asked me that before. Let me think about that for a sec. Well, I mean, at the age that they're out now, I'm a trusted guide. Someone who answers questions, provides food, comfort, a roof. Not for all of them. My son is married and has his own place, my oldest, but someone who's there all the time, someone who is willing to grow and to heal from my own journey myself and willing to change her mind. And so, I mean, for a mother, it's a safe feeling of safety and love and unconditional love. So I've never been in the traditional role as their trainer or punisher or controller or ruler, which is most of traditional parenting. But when you are those things, you really can't be the other fully. And so this is all I've ever done. I have never parented any differently. And I think it's kind of maybe unique because a lot of parents come to this life like later after trying things that didn't work or kind of going against their instincts, and the contrast kind of pushes them toward this. So I don't know why. Maybe I was meant to help other people. It's what I like to think. This is my purpose. I never get sick of talking about it. I wake up every day going like, when is this, when am this fuse going to burn? Am I still forever going to talk about how much I love being a mom? But I really, really love it. And I want to help other parents. I really want to help other parents love it. And they do when they learn that they don't have to do all the things society says. But I think that a lot of people that hear about this philosophy initially, and this is most of the TV interviews and stuff, they make the assumption that if you're not controlling and punishing your child, then you're not in the role of the authority, that it's neglectful or permissive. The only thing that comes to their mind is if you're not doing any of those things, then you must just not care. And your life is crazy and everybody's doing wild things they shouldn't, and that and it's not like that. It's rarely do people know what you do instead. And that's presence, it's presence and connection and listening and figuring things out and, facilitating their learning and their life, driving a lot.
Yeah.
And
I think it's that presence that our modern society has made very difficult for parents to provide. Yeah, it does involve really a re-evaluation of the modern lifestyle. If we're really going to give children, what they really deserve and help raise children to be very thriving in this world, it's going to take a different approach and it's going to require creativity on all our parts, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, creativity, which a lot of people lack in the mainstream. They're so dualistically mindset, like, oh, live from Nightline, NBC, we have Dayna Martin with us. And with the sparkly Martins, they go to bed at whatever time they want to, 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, wow. They never could wow, they have no rules and this and that. And just not being able to think outside of the box again. And it's really, it can be kind of frustrating, but that's why you got to throw in the humor to just kind of laugh it off, which I'm sure you've had to do, like just being in the hot seat, literally. Like, I'm kind of curious as to, did you ever get any kind of like backlash, even like live with the public, them asking you questions or booing or that kind of stuff, or?
Never booing. Oh, wait, no, maybe on one show they were freaking out about something. Yeah. But you know how TV is. I mean, they're prompted to have certain reactions too. So you take it with a great assault. And but there was like pure shock when I said that my kids didn't go to bed till 1 a.m. And I think that what's helped me get through it and helped me continue is a couple things. For one, I know that any process of change starts with, denial of, or, pushing up against this outrage. It's always, there's a process to change. First, there's outrage or resistance, and then there's more acceptance later. But there is that process. And I know that not everybody could stand in the place of the first step of change, ridicule, and somebody has to be brave enough. Some of us have to be brave enough to stand in that space of change and be willing to be ridiculed in order for it to go to the next stage. And I see it, it's going to the next stage. I see it every day. I can't even believe it when I go on TikTok. I don't go often, but my daughter will send me things and I'll be like, there's people talking about co-sleeping, tons of them. There's people talking about extended breastfeeding. There's people talking about unschooling. I mean, this was unheard of. Like, I was one of the only voices speaking about this, and I'm so happy. Now it's shifting. It's becoming more accepted. In fact, when I knew it was becoming more accepted? When TV stations and interviews stopped calling me.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
I saw the process of change happen. But and the other thing, so I kind of knew that going in, like, of course people are going to react like this. It's new. I would have reacted like this, before I had kids. I would have thought it was nuts before I really fully understood it. So coming from that place of compassion for others, I don't ever get defensive. That's hard. That's something I help new advocates that want to promote this life understand, is that have compassion for people that are judging it. Because they don't understand it. It takes a long time to really understand and integrate this philosophy. And then another whole thing to apply it. It's a big, big paradigm shift. It takes a lot of inner work and support. And so when I hear it, with a little sound bite given to somebody, they have no rules and everybody's like, oh, of course they don't get it. So I'm just like, it'll take me a minute to explain this, but I don't take it personal. That's another big thing. I don't take any of it personal. They're discussing ideas and philosophy. Sometimes, not really me, I don't take it personal. So it's not that I have like a hard shell. In fact, I'm a really sensitive person, but I understand people's reaction.
Yeah, it takes an inner confidence, to stand in the face of that ridicule, and that, like the whole, I guess, media culture of over the top criticizing for, on these shows, for for entertainment purposes, right? That's
Yeah.
pretty brave to go on and face that. I'll just say
It's pretty
Yeah.
fun too.
Totally.
You know, my kids learned a lot. Anything that we were part of, anything I was part of that they were involved in, it was always consensual. Everything. When we did the show Wife
Yeah.
Swap, they had the choice. We would not have done it if they didn't all want to. They understood. You know, that's the only show you get that I've gotten paid for. And at the time, I forget how much it was exactly, but everybody in my family got an equal amount. You know, and they didn't have to be filmed. We let the producers know if there's any, you know, scenes being filmed and any of the kids don't want to be part of it, respect that. That's part of our philosophy. And so we've never entered into any kind of public like media. We've done dozens of TV appearances. Anytime they don't want to be part of it. And there's been a couple shows where Tiffany, my second child, decided like, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, oh, that's fine, honey, just go sit down. And they've said, where'd Tiffany go? She doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, you know, like I never have coerced or forced them or told them what to say. In fact, you know, that's a really interesting part of it. I've heard a lot of people say, you know, like, how did you do that while living the philosophy? Because no matter what my kids did, it was still like promoting truth in our life. Whether they rolled on the floor and yelled or whether they were crying, which if they cried, I would always step aside. That rarely happened. You know, like it didn't matter. I didn't have to have them act a certain way. I didn't have to have them say anything they didn't want to say. There was never anything scripted. And so I would let the TV producers know, like anything, I'm happy to do this, but this is how we live and this is how it's going to flow. And they actually loved it. I got nothing but positive feedback from any TV appearance that we've made. Even if the end cut ended up being pretty sensationalized at the time of the filming, there wasn't one person that came to our house that wasn't like, wow, this is like really interesting. This is a really awesome concept.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Can I ask a question
Sure.
real quick just on that? Because yeah, looking at some of those clips and all that, and yeah, it seems like they cherry picked certain things out of context just to sensationalize and kind of like, whoa, this radical family unschooling, like they're like on the fringe of society, and how could they integrate into it? It's like you're in the daily operations of where your local environment is, and so are the kids, and voila, it's not that hard to understand sometimes, you know, like
Yeah.
like trying to paint a certain picture on you guys in a sense. But yeah, I really applaud everyone's, you know, courage and, you know, just sovereignty, I guess, you know, solidarity, you know, as a family unit. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I really, the respect of really not scripting your kid's voice at all, I respect so much. Yeah.
I'm going to share I'll share one little funny situation with you that came up just to give you an idea. So we were filming a sizzle reel for Sharp Entertainment. We were going to have a reality show on TLC. I ended up not moving forward with that. I didn't want to take my life in that direction. But so they were filming the sizzle reel with us, which was really fun. And we went to the grocery store and they said, well, how do you normally grocery shop? And I said, well, we do something called like freedom shopping. And I give my kids an amount that I can afford that week that they can each have, and they shop. And so they said, okay, just go through the store and like put tons of stuff in the cart. Have your daughter Tiffany pick stuff out. So we did. We went through, put all these things in the cart. She picked out a cake and like some healthy foods and all different stuff. And we get to the register and the producer's like, okay, we're done. You got to put all that stuff back. I'm like, what? No, my daughter just picked all this out. There's no way I'm having, you told her she could have it. I know, but like this is just for the filming. And I said, no, I'm sorry. And she looked at me like, what? I'm like, don't worry, sweetie. I'm like, listen, you can't do that. I refuse to do that to my child. And so he like ran over and called somebody, came like, okay, you can have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tiffany's really highly sensitive at the time. I think she might have been like 8, and she was just, I'm like, well, this is not going to happen. If you told me ahead of time and I could have given her that information, okay, you were going to be picking things up but putting it back, that would have been different, but you didn't give us that information. Anyway.
Yeah. Only fair to her, right? And I think that shows again, like that you're really thinking about the mindset and the emotions of your child, you know, and just not kind of jerking them around based on sort of what the adults say or the authorities say.
Right.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who says, well, how do your kids learn about how to be disciplined, or learn how to do what it takes to succeed in the world if you're not giving them consequences and rules?
That's a kind of a detailed answer, but I will share that there are natural consequences, and then there are parent-imposed consequences to imitate the real world as a sort of lesson. The perspective is that you have this artificial consequence situation in your home based on your arbitrary, ideas, and that way they get used to obeying out in the real world. But the thing is, kids are really smart. They know when something's arbitrary and when it doesn't make sense. And it really causes a disconnect between parent and child. So artificial limits for the sake of teaching a child that there are limits in the world don't make sense to kids any more than forcing them to learn math because there's math in the world. Children learn about natural consequences in life just through living life by my side.
Yeah.
And it's really a simple concept. It's funny to have to explain it, isn't it, sometimes, because it's like, I feel so bad that I have to explain it, that people are so far removed from understanding that they need it explained to them. And I'm really happy to, but it always makes me a little sad because I think about, the parents are trying as hard as they can based on the information they have. And it's so excruciatingly confusing and probably makes no sense to the parent too. This hurts me, but it hurts you. And, I'm doing this because I love you. And there's so many mixed messages that we go through life with when it could be so much more simple.
Right.
Like
Again,
law and stuff.
Yeah, it does. It seems. It's like, I think that one of the problems is that parents aren't spending time with their kids in the way that this model really requires. This is about daily presence, living life together, teaching about life as you're living it in a lot of ways, right? Promoting or allowing them to follow their interests and their passions and then experience the consequences of their process of interacting with those things. And this is a whole lifestyle that, that's different, that I think is important for, I think anyone who's thinking about becoming a parent to really evaluate, because there's a lot of risks and consequences that are taking you away from your own children. I think when you enter into the mainstream schools and models of parenting, I think it creates a disconnect between parent and child, as opposed to what you're describing, which creates this very tight bond and relational connection.
I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting. What would you say about your teenagers? So people believe, that teenagers are naturally going to be rebellious and want to do crazy things. And, what's been your experience with the teenage phase of your kid's life?
I never experienced any of the teenage rebellion for my kids because there's nothing to rebel against aside from society. My daughter, they've all gone through that as they've gotten older. My daughter was vegan, so she would rebel against, not me. They never rebelled against me because I never set it up like that. But I think rebellion is inherent in so many people,
How do you? Yeah. So what you observed in terms of rebellion in your kids was was around questioning things.
Let me think. My daughter rebelled against factory farming, I guess, in her own way. She would go to protests. I would facilitate that. I don't think that there was really anything to rebel against. And I think what happens in a more mainstream, child rearing situation is, as kids get older and they're becoming teenagers, it's not making sense that they have to obey someone that they're smarter than now. And it's just you're questioning, going, this doesn't make any sense to me. I am 15, 16 years old and I know this person's wrong, and why am I being forced to do this? And so you just get louder, instead of a toddler, how they'd express their upset. A teenager, it's more hard for a parent to handle that because teenage rebellion looks like an adult raging against you.
Yeah.
So I don't think teen rebellion exists. It's a myth. It's something so overly perpetuated that parents expect it and they dread it. I don't think it's any more, real than terrible twos, which is something that happens when parents are told they have to control their toddler more. In fact, you just have to, understand that everybody's needs matter, and it takes patience to figure things out. But I've never dealt with any like rebellion at all.
Yeah. And yet I imagine that your kids have a healthy ability to question and critically think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they all have found their own belief systems and tried out, when it comes to like, my son Devin was pagan for a couple of years and now he's Christian, and I've always supported all of his interests. And my daughter Tiffany's Christian, my daughter Ivy is like more atheist. That we all have different beliefs in this family. I'm more spiritually focused, but I do go to church with my daughter. Like we're always exploring and growing and supporting each other. Like it's really, I never thought life could be like this. I never heard of anybody living like this. Like we all have different beliefs. And my husband's from India, so he was raised, with Hindu beliefs. So we have this melting pot of all these different belief systems that all utterly respect each other. My daughter who's atheist, my son will say, can I, why don't we call and I'll pray for you? She doesn't sit there going, I can't believe he's doing this. She's like, okay, thank you. Even though she doesn't believe in it, like it's amazing how open everybody is to each other. And I love that. I love that we can all respect each other. I mean, Ivy, who's atheist, was buying my son Devin, who's Christian, like Christian gifts for Christmas, and vice versa. He was getting her some cool heavy metal stuff that she loves. Like there's this this thing that's really unfolded now that they're adults is like the tolerance and compassion for each other they have for everybody else in their lives. This has been modeled kind of unintentionally. Like I didn't set out and say, I want my kids to respect all other beliefs. So, I was hoping that would happen. But a side effect of this is like, it's crazy. Like you'd never think a family could be, and we're so close. The kids talk every day, even as adults. And I never would have guessed that everybody could hold space for each other's beliefs like we do. And Ivy, even like when Devin was here, she's like, I'll go to church with you. Why don't I want to spend time with you? And they've gone to concerts together too and done a lot of different things. So my point is, this is something that's kind of, I'm still learning about myself, that I look forward to like writing about, and because it's blowing my mind a little bit. I have a picture of Devin when he was like 10 or 11 and he's outside. He was studying paganism and he had a pentagram drawn in the sand and candles all around it. And I took a picture of it. And I'm like, well, I guess I should learn more about paganism to facilitate this more. And just to learn about it, because I don't want to be scared by this. I want to facilitate it. And I looked up local groups, and he got him some books on herbalism, come to find out it wasn't what I thought it was, you know what I mean? And so I have always supported my kids and their beliefs, even if if I knew nothing about it. I was like, I need to meet you where you're at and figure this out. And now he's like,
went into Satanism, for example, though.
Yeah, well, they were actually for a while. My son Devin and his wife, when we really dove deep into understanding it a little bit, like, and once they really were in it, they were like, this isn't really for us. But we were watching videos, we were learning something that was more nature-based, not at all a direction any of us went. But in order for them to make an informed decision, because they were into heavy metal for a long time, like a metalhead from way back. I love heavy metal. And so they were like, what is Satanism really? My grandmother would have rolled over in her grave that I said, let's really research the history of this. And not a direction anybody went, but we were in researching it.
Yeah.
This was many years ago, many years ago. Now he is so involved in his church. He loves Jesus. And I feel that him coming to that, he wasn't like conditioned into it. He chose that. How powerful is that? To me, I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of all my kids and their journey. And I'm really loving like our past because of it,
Yeah. It sounds like you're, by encouraging your kids to follow their interests and to seek knowledge, right? So there's the value on seeking knowledge and experiencing and experimenting with ideas, and that is allowing like a natural trivium process, really. in your unschooling?
I can still remember though, when I remember, oh man, I haven't thought about this in so long, when Devin was like, Mom, me and Nev, like, do you know what Satanism really is? I'm like, oh no, here we go. You know, like, so as a unschooling parent, you get hit with these hard topics about sex and drinking and drugs, and like, it's heavy, you know, it's like, here you have to be there. I'm like, oh honey, I don't know, it's pretty dark stuff. Like, I'm not really feeling comfortable about that. And then, but listen, like, it's really nature based. And I'm like, I don't know about that. You know, so it's like discussions. We had so many discussions to really dig out the truth, talking about manipulation and mind control. And like, so many things branched off of his one little thing of like, what is Satanism? So much learning and growth and connection came from that. They, you know, I'm really, really proud of them for following their instinct and their heart in that dynamic. But yeah, that was one of those parenting times where I was like, oh no.
Yeah. And I think that it is important, you know, to not just like knee jerk, like refuse to allow, you know, something to be spoken about in your home.
Because they would have researched it on their own.
Yeah.
You know? That's the whole thing, is like, I don't want to give the impression that every single thing that's they brought up or we've talked about, I've been like, yes, let's research Satanism. I was like, oh, sweetie, okay. You know, like, because we're authentic people. I show up authentically, like, ooh, that's really uncomfortable for me. Like, he's like, well, it's similar to paganism. I'm like, I don't know about that, love. Let's, and so, I mean, so I show up organically, authentically. I'm willing to change my mind about things, but I'm very honest. Like, I don't think that's correct, that what that's saying, or, you know, like, I trust your judgment, but I am not comfortable XYZ. So like, these things that come up, sometimes I'm like, oh man, okay, I need strength to tackle this, you know, with my kids, but I'm still willing to. I think a lot of parents are so uncomfortable in their child's pain and so uncomfortable discussing these hard things because their parents didn't discuss it with them.
Boom.
I have to plug in my battery. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sure.
There we go. And they just don't know how to approach it.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a high level of skill required here, both for the parent and the child, you know, in order to teach your child, you know, interpersonal skills and healthy conflict resolution and communication skills. And, you know, your challenge to learn those things and demonstrate those things as well. And I imagine
I want to be informed, you know, I want to be educated about the things my kids are interested in. I don't have to learn everything that they potentially could be interested in someday ahead of time. You learn as you go. It's the basis of unschooling philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much of this unschooling is working with interpersonal emotional intelligence type things, you know, like you talked about your kids' sibling rivalry and they're arguing, or you know, wanting to learn something that, you know, maybe you're not so sure of. There's like a need to communicate and deal with distress and learn patience, and there's all this emotional psychological learning as well. So can you share on that?
You know, it's interesting because every child's so different in how they kind of process their emotions. I found that I don't know if there's any way to teach like emotional intelligence. It just, and I think that you can see yourself in your kids too sometimes. Like, there's aspects of my personality that my daughter Ivy holds. She's very like highly sensitive. My daughter Tiffany is a very like quick to upset, has more anxiety than, you know what I mean? So they're all very kind, loving people, but they're all so different. You know? So I can't like say that there's one way to do it, because all four of them are completely different.
Yeah. But it seems to me that what you've been describing as your natural, you know, sort of your approach is providing the need. It's filling a deep need here that children have of learning how to communicate, solve problems, and be, you know, manage their emotions. It seems like a natural part of this whole unschooling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just being there for them to help them process things and talk about things makes a really big difference. You know, understanding that emotional like regulation, this term is funny because it wasn't around back in the day, but I kind of learning to like it a little more. I didn't like it at first, but it is like in the context it was using with kids, it was like forced emotional regulation. Now, how do you get your child? How do you force them to emotionally regulate? Like, I want to use it in the context of a more natural, like them learning to manage their emotions was something that I need to take responsibility for in my own.
Yes.
You know, I realized that, oh my gosh, I get so anxious sometimes. You know, when they were little, I would get really anxious. And there's things I had to learn about myself and change that within myself to be able to like be a better mother. And I think that talking about that with my kids and helping them, and also just honoring wherever they were at, knowing that I didn't have to train it out of them at any certain age.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't see if one of them was really upset or emotionally in a certain way that didn't seem like right at the time. I always looked at them as whole, perfect people the way they were, and that they'd outgrow certain things and with support and love. And that's been the case with all my kids. So they've learned it by not having somebody control it and punish them for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've created that safe environment for their exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's the problem. In today's world that's whirling around in a negative downward spiral, people cannot afford to have that kind of presence. There's so many people that are financially up to the gills with, you know, debt or issues and stuff. We have dual income homes that are struggling to get by and this and that. They're away from the kids. So I'm just curious because, you know, I've been hearing this quite a bit in the internet land and, you know, personally, whether it be single mothers, single fathers, you know, people that are together, whatever the endeavor, people are struggling. And that those are parents with kids in schools. And, you know, even in France, you know, my lady jokes around like, yeah, they know that the public school system is just kind of like a daycare with the nanny state, you know, kind of occupying the kids for 8 hours in the day so that the parents can work away and provide for the family. And this cycle continues in a sense. So any kind of recommendations, any kind of glimmers of hope for people out there that might be listening that want to do the right thing and unschool their kids, but they just don't have the means to do it in a sense, right?
Yeah.
I know it's a tricky one, but
well, I mean, it's just because it's just you have to understand that a lot of this is mindset. Like you have to be willing to change your ideas of what you think your life needs to have to be happy. You know, be willing sometimes to make big changes, like a big disruption in your life sometimes is the best thing to have happen. And you think that leaving your job and having one parent work and one parent home is going to be catastrophic and it's going to destroy everything, or you could never do it, but you'd be surprised what's possible. You know, like when you do step into that place. I was so scared when I knew I'd be a stay-at-home mom, but I didn't know how we do it financially, but things just work out. You learn a lot of skills, you know, you learn a lot of skills yourself. I cloth diapered, you know, I made the baby food. Like I didn't buy into any of the mainstream kind of stuff that I needed to have for my baby. And so it's kind of started then. And I said, wait a minute, what else don't we need? Now, I don't mean this is like you have to live like homesteading, you know, hippies, although I love that. I'm just saying like the cultural idea of like the homesteading hippie kind of person. Like this is for anybody. Like we're so conditioned to think we need to have a certain lifestyle. And for me, it was just rethinking all of that and saying like, let me step into something different and being willing to take that risk. Now I work with a lot of my coaching clients are single parents and working at home. And it's never been like easier to work at home and make money than it is today. You know, so it's like being willing to try something new. You can have it all. You know, so it's that mindset that you can be home and make money in different ways, you know. And so if you want something bad enough, you can have it. However, if you are somebody that just absolutely can't, I totally honor that too. I know not everybody's in the situation to be able to, but I just wanted to just kind of push that mindset a little bit because I didn't think it was possible either. And then you just do it, and then you realize that, wow, I'm still alive, even with less money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
Like
yeah.
life can still be good, really. But looking at our values is really important. And, unfortunately, I think that kind of daycares and kind of putting kids in schools becomes so mainstream, so normal, that people are assuming that's what is best for children. And I really think that we're challenging and need to challenge that assumption, because I don't think it's what's best for children to be sending them away from mothers at 3 months old and putting them in daycares, and parents being disconnected from their relationship with their children, because that is that I feel like the relationship is the foundation of everything, for a child, the relationship with their parents.
Yeah, and kids don't want anything but you. And the simplicity of life. They
Yeah.
so even though you want to give them like
Mhm.
everything you can,
Mhm.
ultimately none of that needs to replace you. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
times parents really broke down the costs of daycare and all these other things of working outside the home. They'd realize that at the end of the day, it's the same
Yeah.
to just leave this job and stay home and live simply, because the money that you save your family, like by being home and by making things yourself and by thinking outside the box, like I used to tell myself, the money I save my family is money I'm making for my family.
Yeah.
And so like I just had that different mindset where I would I had this great book called I think it was called like the Tightwad Gazette or something.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I read that.
It was so good. I learned so much. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, I really do this? I mean, like, but it was fun when you look at it, like fun of like what you can
Yeah.
say. I look back on those years as so like special. At the time I remember being, like, wow, but everything it can be built, I think that's why self-efficiency, like working for yourself and like thinking outside the box, you can, do things that can expand your income. And as my children got older, so did my income, everything grows kind of together. And so at this stage in my life, I'm able to do much more for them, and I'm really happy about that. But there's also, for people that are single parents and both parents working, there's a lot of other unschoolers and people homeschooling now. And there's co-ops and there's ways that you can connect with people that are like-minded. That, the first question I would ask with any kind of group is like, are you familiar with like a partnership-based paradigm and not the authoritarian one? How do you feel about these things? Or start a group like that yourself and switch off caring for each other's children. There's so many ways to make it possible to do it.
Yeah, there are.
That's awesome. I love that. Thank you so much, Dayna.
Yeah.
Can I just say something real quick? Because yeah, I noticed there's like a common type of mentality or reaction, kind of like from the mainstream clips that I saw, the Night Lives and Dr. Phil's and all that, of just you almost like see it written on their forehead, these people, especially the ones, interviewing you sometimes, like, this way of life is a threat to our democracy, kind of like this whole collectivist, state-run authoritarian type of thing, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was just interesting, kind of seeing that with the, they live, putting the glasses on and seeing that.
Well, free thinking children grow up into independent, free thinking adults. That's a bit of a threat to our system of slavery here. So yeah, but
yes.
Did you catch any flack on that kind of stuff, or?
Maybe not putting those words, but like alluding to that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I've gotten that
Right
from the
on,
beginning,
Yeah.
I've gotten that from the very beginning, even before I could even really understand it, like now it's like, yeah, that's kind of the goal.
Yeah. And I think, that you just made the point that echoes what you said earlier, that children need their parents, and parents, if we can like recognize our value and know that we are our children's answer, we have what they need, and we are the ones that should be teaching them and should be, spending time with them, that it's not like we're inadequate and need to put our children into the hands of people who are qualified to teach them.
Right.
We need to be that, become that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And, child's childhood goes so quick. And, this is something that I will never, ever regret doing. I'm just grateful that I did it and that I woke up when I did so early on. And life can be joyful. It doesn't have to be what everybody's doing. You can raise wonderful human beings and like happy, content kids who are whole and never have their spirits broken. And you don't have to live with regret of how you raised your kids like so many people do.
Yeah. Or seeing them grown up and asking, where did this go? And like regretting not having more memories with them,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So we're approaching I think a little over an hour now. So I think it may be a good time.
Keep you over time.
To see if there's
Okay.
any final points or things that we haven't touched on that you think are important.
Yeah,
we
I'd
covered
like
a lot.
just through, kind of just bringing it back to what I was, talking about in the beginning of just, throughout over a dozen years of, like you've had videos on YouTube at least for 14 years, that's that old school stuff, like before you could post something, more than 15 minutes type of, paradigm.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I have the first video ever on YouTube for peaceful parenting and unschooling.
wow, that's awesome.
Wow, that's
So
really...
my question is to you, like, what have you noticed? And it's great that you've noticed, a rising trend towards, independent parenting, schooling, and all that stuff. However people want to word it, homeschooling, unschooling, whatever. But at the same time, have you noticed any kind of polarizations or like any heated arguments between parents or different sides of, people pushing for more of the public or private schools? And like, have you had any kind of resistance, that you've seen personally yourself, or like just within, I wouldn't even want to call it a movement, but just kind of like, just more people picking up their kids and
Well,
the
I think ever
responsibility in their
since
hands. Yeah.
in the last like 4 years, more and more people are homeschooling. And because there's more people homeschooling, they're looking for options within that. So they find unschooling. So I found that more and more people are coming to it. And I don't think that nearly as many people oppose it as they used to. Of course, there's always the naysayers, but it's not something I go and look for. Like I'm not posting on public school boards, like sharing about this, saying what you're doing is wrong. So it's how you show up and like promote and advocate. And I always advocate for what I'm for. I'm not somebody who really advocates for what I'm against, because I don't even like to focus on schools. I could talk about it like during interviews and stuff, but it's not really my flavor of advocacy. I like to share about what we do instead with everything.
Yeah, sure.
And so because of that, I don't personally get a lot of negative, and I don't go looking for it. I'm sure in a lot of my videos and stuff there's plenty, but I never go and read any of that because I'm spending time with my kids.
Yeah, excellent. You know where your priorities are.
Yeah.
So in terms of kids who like you mentioned, one of your daughter wanted to go to college or went to college, and so unschooling is so disconnected from the like diploma world. And what do you recommend to parents who are unschooling that want to keep the door open for college for their kids?
Yeah, well, I think in all 50 states, you can graduate your child yourself with your own diploma. And colleges right now are, and they have been for the last decade, are looking for unschoolers. They are so sick of the cookie cutter like transcripts that when it really stands out when an unschooler wants to go there, because they know that unschooling philosophy is internal motivation of the child. They're not just being forced to go or jumping through hoops and here I go. And they can feel it in the transcripts. And so it's really easy actually to write transcripts for colleges, and you just do a search for it. I can help anybody that's looking in that direction. There's also a lot of umbrella schools and online private schools that will give your child a diploma if you take a certain test or jump through whatever hoops they have. It's very, very easy. It's such an illusion that it's difficult to get to grade these things. It really is.
Yeah.
And
we spoke with David Rodriguez. Are you familiar with him?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he and I are really good friends. We've known each other. We spoke in China right before COVID. We've been friends for Many, many years, yes.
Yeah.
He's got his
My
program.
house, he's spoken at my events, I've spoken at his events, and
Yeah.
our time in China, bringing unschooling there was
Mhm.
like next level crazy fun, and
Wow.
it was one of
Amazing.
the best memories we have together, he and I.
Yeah. And you've spoken both at Acapulco and yeah, very like that's very cool.
True. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm really glad that point about the college because I think that is a holdup for some people,
Totally.
right? Thinking they're keeping their kids or somehow giving their kids a disadvantage in the world or they won't be able to go down that path. And that's not true. So,
No, the opposite is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really easy. You just learn, your children will learn what they need to get into that particular college, but because they're older, and they'll be able to learn it really quickly and easily. And go through the process of that. And because the child's internally motivated, if they want to go to college, they will.
Yes.
And there's
They'll
always
get
junior
there.
college, community college as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a whole movement of uncollege, kind of like unschooling of you can learn everything that you pay a college for at home. I know there's specialized careers that's not the case where you need to go, but there's a lot of things that you can learn online instead of going into debt with student loans and everything else. That's another whole interview.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a topic worth it. Yeah, broaching at
Yes.
some point. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Please share more about what you're doing currently and how people can access your work and the programs
Your books.
Yeah, your books, your
Sure.
programs.
Yeah, I've written a couple books. Raising Rebels is my latest book on radical unschooling. It's called Raising Rebels, Parenting Advice from the Girl Your Parents Warned You About. And it's a lot of essays and stories from my children growing up, kind of real life examples. It's a great book. I can send you the e-copy. Anybody that wants to message me, I'm happy to send it to you for free.
That's
The
great.
copy of that book. So my book Radical Unschooling is the most known work that I've published, and that is available on Amazon or any major bookstore. I have a website called daynamartin.com, and I have a lot of different programs. So right now I train people to be advocates like I am, because when I started out, there wasn't many people doing this and there wasn't much support. And I could handle all of the requests on my own, traveling, speaking, radio interviews, TV programs, all kinds of different avenues, conference gigs. But now there's so many more people doing it that I can't do it on my own. And I want to train other people to do that, to be able to step into that space for a career. Something else I'm releasing in a month from now is a new radical unschooling community. It's grown so much, and I have a Facebook group with about 35,000, might be more now, members called Radical Unschooling. And because Facebook is not very private and you're not getting, really great info sometimes when you get like more mainstream parents posting, I thought to myself, I want a place where people can come, a community to join. So that's going to be where I'll do live streams, answer questions. So you can look out for that on my page being announced soon. So I also have a lot of classes and different things that you can check out in articles.
Great. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. I'm glad to see that your work is going strong.
Thank you. Yeah, it's stronger than ever. It's been so wonderful. And I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity to talk to you guys too.
Yeah. Thank you for being part of our show. Yeah. I think this is like such important. It's an important topic and I think it's underappreciated. So I want to be a promoter. Awesome. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much, guys. It was so nice to connect with you both, Leslie and Derek.
Yeah. Thank you, Dayna.
Yeah, likewise. And tell your son, Devin, that we're going to be interviewing. I already have a video out with a good friend, Justice Wagman. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's one of the modern day blacksmiths like your son doing his things. And that's great. Selling their stuff on Etsy, more power to y'all. So
yeah, he lives up in Oregon and is old school, like metal worker. Amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Amazing products he creates. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait. I'll definitely tell Devin. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All righty. Well, we'll look forward to following your work and seeing where it goes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
Love you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, Dayna.
Bye.
Take care.
Today we're having a great school debate. Now,
I think it's internal motivation again, and I think schools feel as though they have all the knowledge of the world locked up in that building, but you can find anything you can learn in school, you could find somewhere else. You could find on the computer, you could find in books. There's so many resources. Devin knows as much as any child in school, but he's learned it in different ways. So unschooling isn't anti-school by any means. It's just alternatives to the way that children traditionally learn, with somebody standing in front telling them facts.
Your kids are going to grow up and make decisions about, like, my health care, or make public policy that's going to affect me, everybody. So yeah, I care about.
Why is
what
that a
you're
bad
doing
thing,
with
though?
your kids.
Like, how do you see that as being negative? Like, do you think my children are going to make bad choices for you?
Definitely in the unschooling department, yes. In the radical schooling, you're saying they learn. There's a difference between learning, just being out there learning, like I'm learning right now about a lot of things, and reading books and being book smart. There's a huge difference.
Our children are quite book smart.
okay, hold on. Where's Kathy?
There's a proverb that says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. So the first math lesson of homeschooling is when you put your kid in a classroom full of 30 other kids, you get 31 fools. Children are not the best socializers of each other. There needs to be some oversight, some supervision, some people presenting the principles that you're talking about.
Okay, but they say education happens as a side effect of living life. One of the things that I really hated in school, among many things, as I've said, was history. I thought it was boring
and irrelevant, and I said, those are a bunch of dead people. Why do I care?